All right. Welcome, everybody. My name is Elisa Berner. I am one of the counselors at Westview. Thank you for joining us tonight. Hopefully, we're able to provide you some great information as to help you prepare your student for academic success. I have with me Wendy Davis, who is our teacher on special assignment, working with helping us provide supports for students to be more successful in the classroom. And Wendy, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
So my name is Mindy Davis, and my background is high school social science, and I am the intervention TOSA for the district working with the high schools. And I'm really excited to share some of what I know about academic success to you all, and so hopefully it helps your students as well.
Great. So I'm going to be admitting people in as they join and monitoring the chat while Mindy presents. So I'm going to go off screen and let Mindy take it from here.
Great. Is it better for me to go the small one, Ms. Berner? Is that better? I'll go that one. Okay, so welcome everyone. There we go. We will be sharing this set of slides, a slide deck with you in the chat so that you can have access to this, but these are some important school contacts and these are just links, the teacher list, the counseling list, the administrative list, and this will be useful to you in contacting whoever may be most useful for you in the school setting. And one of the things that we will be talking about, our second topic, is going to be self-advocacy for our students. So we have separated this into 3 mini lessons. The first one is on procrastination, and we're going to talk more in depth about that. The second one is going to be about student advocacy and how you can support your students to advocate for themselves. And the last one will be kind of a more self-guided parent tech support. And if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask away. And otherwise, we'll just go ahead and get started. So first is procrastination. And these are kind of our 3 topics. What is it? Why do people do it? What is the neuroscience of procrastination? And knowing all this and that it is something that's pretty deep, how do I address it and break the habit loop? So that's what we'll be covering there. So first, whenever we think about procrastination, sometimes we think that it's just something that's a time management, that it's an organization, and but there's actually more to it. And that a lot of times when we are procrastinating, we're doing something else actively in order to avoid something that we don't want to do. And so it's not lazy, it's not putting something off, there's a deeper level to it. And really what it's all about is self-preservation. So why are people trying to preserve themselves? It's all about avoiding those negative emotions that you see on the top. It's boredom, it's anxiety, it's insecurity, it's frustration, it's resentment. And oh, I have this little one over there. Let's see. Oops, sorry. Whatever. It's self-doubt. So procrastination serves to avoid these negative emotions. Okay. And we see 4 common types of students who are procrastinators. And these are all students that have a very heightened sense of what others think of them. So if your student is a procrastinator, they are also more aware than an average student of what their perception of others of them. Perfectionists are going to tend to be procrastinators, thrill seekers, avoiders, ambivalent or indecisive people. So can anyone looking at those groups of students share why they think that procrastinating will serve either being a perfectionist or a thrill seeker or an avoider or an ambivalent or indecisive person? Feel free to unmute yourself. Maybe we're not gonna. Anyone?
I let everybody know that they can put it in the chat if they don't want to unmute or be on camera since we are streaming. So
perfect.
I think I know why thrill seekers want to procrastinate. It's they just want to check how long they can push it, so they will have a very sharp deadline, and what will happen then, and how they will solve it, or what it will happen if they will push it and it will never, and they will never actually submit assignment, and then what will happen. So they kind of make adventures for themselves.
Perfect. Yes, there's a thrill seeking, there's a rush, right? There's how far can I push myself? How close can I get to the deadline? And then there's almost like a badge of honor of how close you got to it. And and sometimes it works out and they're still successful, and sometimes they're not successful, but either way they got that rush. Their brain got that feedback that they were seeking as a thrill seeker. What about avoiders or indecisive people or perfectionists? How does procrastination serve their needs? Well, perfectionists don't want to make mistakes. And if they procrastinate, then they have a reason for having made a mistake, and they can put off the threat of having made a mistake for as long as possible. Avoiders are going to have the ability to just avoid, and they're kind of similar to the ambivalent or indecisive, and not having to commit to doing an activity that causes them dread is going to serve that self-preservation that they're looking for. So that's how all of these different groups are going to be served by procrastination. So here's two statements. One, we avoid doing work to avoid the judgment of our abilities. Procrastination prevents our sense of ability from being threatened. It's easier to fail if you didn't try, because that there's no judgment there. I didn't try. Of course I failed. And if I was successful and I didn't try, then I look a little bit smarter. I look a little bit more able, and I win both ways. If I procrastinated and I was successful, great. If I procrastinated and I wasn't successful, that's logical. And so how do we, next we're going to talk about how is this happening in the brain. There is there's an argument that I would hear from students all the time. Oh, I do better when I procrastinate. If I wait to the last minute, I do better. And there's two ways that you can argue against that as a parent. First, usually that's not the statement that students are making when they're incredibly stressed because they have procrastinated. Usually this is what they say after or while they are in the beginning of procrastinating, when their brain is still receiving benefits from procrastinating and they're not getting to any level of anxiety from it. Also, if students always procrastinate, then they don't actually have a good control group of what does their work look like when they're not procrastinating. So that's kind of a way of thinking about encountering that argument, because I would hear it all the time from students. So here's the neuroscience of procrastination and how this feeds our brain and our reward system. So we get a horrible assignment, a project we don't want to do, and we feel a sense of dread. We don't want to do it, and we want to do everything else. We want to clean our room. We want to organize our bookshelf. We want to paint a picture. We want to go exercise. We want to do everything else except for that. So we procrastinate. And then we get that sense of relief. Phew, we didn't have to do it. That's a reward. I didn't want to do it, so I didn't do it. So my brain says, thank you for not making me do that. And so as it says, it means we don't deal with the task or the emotions, and those emotions are going to worsen. But in the meantime, we're feeling really good at not doing what we don't want to do. Then we get to the stress. We get to, okay, we actually have to do this. But we tend to do it poorly because we're rushed, because we didn't organize, because we didn't take the time to do it. We might feel additional stress if this was a group project, if this was some kind of group work that we're letting down our teammates on. And then we do it, and then we have either a positive or negative impact. And as I've stated, it doesn't actually matter what the end result is, but next time we are going to do the same thing again, because we don't have necessarily an alternative to offer. And although we felt really bad during the stress, we also felt bad about the idea, the project at the beginning, and that purple part, that relief, that was the part that the brain is going to remember, that the brain really benefited and had that positive experience. So how does the brain respond to procrastination? This, when I was doing my research, was fascinating to me. And neuroscience says when we look at ourselves in the future, it's like it's a stranger. That person who is dealing with those hardships, wow, that's really rough for that person. But in the meantime, I am experiencing either the dread or the stress or the relief. So, and mostly it's going to be that relief. So we don't see those potential problems and that stress later on and anticipate it, because that's someone else. That's what they're going to experience. So we're really relishing that reward system, that the relief of not having to do it. And it's made worse, it's exacerbated by the student brain, the prefrontal cortex, where our good decision making is developing still, and how teens typically deal with stress. So these are some of the long-term effects of procrastination. And if you recognize some of those as having a lot to do with stress, it's because they do. So if you procrastinate all the time, you're always under stress, and this is going to be, this is the results of it. And you may have seen, hints of these in your student if they have been procrastinating. They're not getting enough sleep when they're trying to catch up with something. They're falling behind. They're stressed out. They don't tend to like, they might not like school as much. And we have high achievers that also are going to procrastinate, and they're also feeling these long-term effects as well. So how do we disrupt this? This is a habit loop. And so what do we do about it? This is kind of the next slide we'll kind of talk about more in depth, but we have to recognize that this is a learning process, and we can encourage forgiveness. And we say, look, we're going to try to disrupt these habits, and it's going to be hard. And we'll have, we'll have good times. We'll have, we'll make progress. And sometimes we'll still procrastinate. And that's okay, because this is a journey, and the end result is that we're going to have better habits, and that's where we're heading. Self-compassion is really important, because you don't want to compile dread and then feelings of failure at not having disrupted this loop make things even worse. So you really want to make this a positive experience for your students so that they can be successful. And that leads to the bigger, better offer. Put it in small chunks, and we'll talk about that in the next slide. But every step that is done well, we want to celebrate, because that brain needs that reward. And if the brain is not getting some kind of reward from this, then they're going to go back to the procrastination, where we saw the reward was that relief at not having to do that task. So we kind of broke it up into 1, 2, 3, 6 steps. First is the awareness. Awareness is multi-pronged. It's an awareness of the emotions that go into, that us into a new topic, a new task. It's awareness of how we're going to be successful and what is going to help us be successful. If I don't do well in a certain environment and I do better in another environment, that's another level of awareness that we want to encourage. Making sure that your student has places of success to go, that you mix it up sometimes. Maybe for math, it's one area, and maybe for English, it's another area. And it can change. And then we have the perspective. And so we want to alter the perspective sometimes in our student of getting started is the hardest part. So even in, our own work that we do, It's daunting to have a blank document. It's daunting to have 6 math problems that are 7 parts each. There's a lot of reasons for us to not want to do something. And so one of the things that we can ask our students is, okay, we're not even worrying about you doing this work. What would you tell a friend of how to get started? If your friend was writing this essay, how would you help them get started? And then they can remove themselves from the situation and they can start thinking, okay, well, I would tell them to do this. Or, and I've even done this in class sometimes where I've called on students, oh, what would you say to this question? And sometimes they say, I don't know. And sometimes I say, well, what if you did know? What would be a guess that you might have if you had a good idea? And then they can say, well, instead of just it being a guess, if I did know, I might say this. And it takes away a little bit of the risk of making mistakes. And this is going to be important, especially for our perfectionist students. Next is we want to kind of commit to the system, and we want to make sure that we are going to be supportive of our students and that we're going to kind of encourage them to take on these responsibilities and arm them with planners, whatever type of music if they want to listen to the music, but just making sure that we're all supporting the situation to be successful. Having goals that are reasonable is a really important part. I was in a meeting with a family the other day, and the teacher, the student was missing a bunch of assignments. Let's say they're missing 40 assignments. That's crazy. That's daunting. So we don't want to say, okay, well, let's do, for the next 4 days, we're going to do 10 more assignments in addition to our work. That's not a realistic goal. But if we can break it up and even say, our goal isn't going to be all 40 assignments. Our goal is going to be 30, because in the end, we want to get some of that done. And revisiting goals and teaching students that it's okay to veer away from what they had, what they had thought was going to be their goal in the first place. Self-talk is really important, and it's really important for them to be in that positive mindset of, I can do this. If I think negative thoughts, those are just negative thoughts. My thoughts are not me. I am my actions, not my thoughts. And in order to, and we'll get into this as well when we talk about test taking as well, just really setting themselves up for success. And then finally, being flexible. And this is breaking those giant activities, those 20 assignments or whatever it is, into small chunks, and celebrating every time that they are successful. And because if we're not celebrating those small successes, it's going to go back to the habit loop of procrastination. And so that was a lot. So any questions or thoughts or stories or anything? I don't know if I'll just go like that. I can keep on trucking too.
Nothing's come up in the chat, so.
Okay. All right. Did I miss anything, Ms. Berner, that you can think of?
No, I think you did well.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about tests. Okay. And student advocacy. So student advocacy is a skill that is going to serve our students forever. Whenever we talk about it, when I would teach seniors, we talk about networking, we talk about office hours in college, we talk about this, no one's going to advocate for you. It has to be you. And so here are some strategies to support this development in your student. And here's why. We want to develop agency in our students. And when we do that, they start building their self-confidence. They start respecting themselves more. And when they respect themselves more, they demand others to respect them at that level. They have better teamwork. They connect better with people because they know how they want to be treated and how to ask for that treatment. So you're going to have those healthier relationships. You can properly express your needs to achieve goals. Just like we were talking about with procrastination, how goal setting is important there. This is advocating for yourself is going to be one of the things that is going to allow students to reach those goals. And finally, conflict resolution and problem solving skills. These are really important in their ability to do well in classes. It's going to be important in life. And the more practice that they have doing this by forcing themselves to advocate for themselves, they will hone those skills better. So here are some opportunities for self-advocacy that we can encourage our students to do. Attending office hours. Even if students don't need to go and attend those office hours for academic support, it's a good time to go and to just talk to the teacher and make those connections. And in that connection making, you're networking, or the student is networking, and they're also able to, if they need to ask for something, they will feel more comfortable doing it. Same thing is during class time, if it's appropriate. And I mean, might be in the chat in a Zoom, it might be in person during, some a classwork time. Sometimes they're going to have to email their teacher and other adult for, a letter of recommendation. They might need to email for extra support. And all of these are good opportunities for the student to learn how to be asking for help. One of the things that my parents did as soon as I could drive, it feels like, I scheduled my own dental doctor, any appointment, haircuts, that was all on me. And so it was important that in addition to advocating, I'm also organizing my schedule. And that's another great skill to allow students to do for themselves. And this will be important when they move out of the house too. And one of the interesting aspects of students now is that they don't have, in general, great phone skills, that they don't always, because they don't have practice in talking on the phone. And so one of the things that you can offer to your student is to call family members. You can have them set up, if they, for me, it was my daughter who's 8, and she had to call her friend's dad's cell phone in order to set up a play date. Obviously, your students are much older than that, and they have their own phones, but have them practice calling family members and have the family member give them feedback about how they spoke, about if they were clear or not, if they used, filler words, if what they wanted was clearly expressed, and use those as learning opportunities. We have these series of resources for you. The office hours video is just one that explains 4 or 5 reasons that students could use office hours. There's also peer counselor tutoring if students need extra academic help. Khan Academy and Crash Course are both free resources that are going to allow students to get extra support and extra learning on a variety of subjects. There's a ton of them, and they're all free. And then there's a couple handouts about things that students can control and how students can start identifying areas for them to advocate with in their own lives. And then for self-advocacy and preparing for tests, the connection here is before and after. Talking to the teacher about a test is always going to be a great step for students to take. A lot of times, and there's all different kinds of tests, and this is going to be a multiple choice test. I'm talking SATs, I'm talking AP exams, I'm talking essays. All of those are some level of assessment that students are being measured about their content knowledge. And the more comfortable they feel talking to teachers and talking to their peers, the better they're going to be able to prepare in a collaborative way for an exam. And when students talk about their own learning, it solidifies what they're getting in the classroom, and it helps them to make their own connections. And so I really encourage you as parents to talk to your students about what they're learning encourage them to use you as a resource for tests. If they have a study guide, say, I'm going to look at the study guide and I can ask you some questions. If there is no study guide, have them make one, and have them, with going back to procrastination, do this early and often so that their brain can remember the content, so that they feel comfortable during the test, that they can say, I am prepared, and actually be, and know that that's true. So going into during the test, one of the first things I would tell my students, because I taught AP US and AP Gov, is I would tell them, write down as much as you can remember. There's a ton of vocabulary and all different kinds of tests, whether it's a language or math or English, there's always some kind of vocabulary that they're gonna have to remember. And probably going into the test, they're gonna be trying to remember that in their brain and keep going back to it. But if they are allowed to write on their test, and usually they can, if they can just spill everything that they're trying to remember in the margins or on the back of some paper, they can always go back to that. And that level of having that information on their paper will help them with any kind of anxiety that they might be feeling about the test, and it'll be a resource for them to go back to. And I was just talking to one of my neighbors the other day, and he's taking APEC, and he said, well, we have 35 minutes in order to do this writing. And I said, you need to organize and write down your ideas for the first 5 minutes. And even though that sounds like an incredible amount of time, to take 1/7 of your time to just do some pre-writing that isn't the actual essay, it will organize you, it will calm you, it will focus you. And you will do better on the test. When we talk about tests with questions, skip the hard ones if they're not, I call it a warm-up. I compared it to athletics. You usually want to start easy. When you go and you do a run, you don't start sprinting. You start by a light jog. So this parallel to that is when you start a test, you want to do the easy questions first and feel good about yourself and get that positive feedback. And then you can go to the hard questions. And then, oh, I hear my son. Lastly, after the test, do test corrections. Whether there are test correction points or not, do the test corrections, because that's how we learn. And when I had students, if they had a study guide, they always had a study guide, I would have them look at the test and then look at their study guide and see where that was their disconnect. And then if they couldn't figure out where the disconnect was as to why they got that question wrong, go back to the teacher again. That's a valuable resource for the students to have. And that's when those self-advocacy resources and skills will come in. And this is a video about parent technology that you can watch on your own. And then I think that's a link to the upcoming parent academies.
And at the end, there's at the very end, after it says thanks, there's some resources, or maybe it's before it says thanks. But anyhow, there's a bunch of resources, and that's where the procrastination research came from, if you are interested in that and want to go further into it. So parent video will tell you how to use My Plan, how to use Canvas as a parent. You can always depend on your students to do it, but it's also very empowering for you as a parent to go in, monitor see what they're going on in their classes, see what their grades are, all of that really good stuff.
Great. Thank you everybody for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye.